I think it was Route 1, Marianna, Arkansas, 2 miles from LaGrange, 8 miles south of Marianna. And my grandparents were 2 miles further south. My Aunt Madge and all the Uffingstones were all 2 miles east in LaGrange. Our church was in LaGrange, a Methodist church, a small one-room church. My daddy was the song leader, boys' Sunday school teacher. My mother was the piano player and taught the girls Sunday school. My grandparents on the Markham side were very active in the church also. I don't remember too much about my grandparents on the Howe side. My daddy was the youngest of the children. I had Aunt Madge, I had Aunt Patricia, I had Uncle George, and then an adopted Uncle Mason. And on the Markham side, I had my cousin Carrie. Her mother was Aunt Adeline, and her father was Uncle Ernest.
I was born Carrie Ernestine Beck, October the 13th, 1938. When I arrived that wee hours of the morning, they looked at the doctor and said, well, we're going to borrow your name. And that's how I became Carrie.
I'm Markham Howe. Benjamin Markham Howe, as a matter of fact, named after my father, Ben Howe, and my mother's maiden name, Markham. Born May 17th, 1939, in Methodist Hospital in Memphis, Tennessee. I got introduced one time as a native of Tennessee. It kind of took me by surprise, and I thought, well, I was born there. And then I wasn't there for 3 or 4 days. My very earliest memory is of my brother Pat being born in Methodist Hospital in Memphis. And I can remember crawling up in bed with my mother while she was holding Pat, my brother.
The bed that my mother and daddy had is at Markham's house right now, and it's an unusual bed. It was sort of high up, and I fell out of the bed onto the floor one night. Got up and got back in bed, so I remember that.
Well, my earliest memories were the summertime days with grandmother and granddaddy Markham out on the farm. I remember with granddaddy, I was always in his car, and like I said, we would be riding along, but he would be more looking at the crops and, encouraging me to look at the crops. So I would, I guess, learn about the crops also and the land, because the land meant so much. But I remember spending a lot of time with grandmother and granddaddy Markham.
I can remember that in the house we lived in at Cypress Corner, it did not have indoor plumbing at the time. A little later it did. But I can remember her giving me a bath in the sink. And the sink itself was a little bit bigger than a standard sink is today. It did not have a divider in there. She'd put me in there, and she'd give me a bath, park me up there, drive me off, and that sort of thing.
I have a memory of my mother taking me to the outhouse late at night one time.
I remember spending time at Markham and Pat's house at Cypress Corner, and that was a lot of fun too. I just enjoyed living in the city. You don't get to get that farm life and that outdoorsy life, and so it was a lot of fun for a child, especially, to go to the farm and be able to get outside and see the animals and do things like that.
This is actually Carrie's picture with Pat, but there's Honeysuckle. Now Honeysuckle was our dog. She's a collie, and when we would get home from school, we'd listen to these westerns on the radio.
Here they come, riding fast and riding hard. It's time for adventure in the modern West with Bobby Benson and the B-Bar-B Riders.
Smiley Burnett, I think, had a pet skunk whose name was Honeysuckle. And so that's where we got the name Honeysuckle, is from the radio show.
I remember Honeysuckle.
A white collie.
I guess because thought of Lassie so
Mhm.
much.
Right.
Yeah.
And she just seemed like a Lassie doll.
Well, she did. She did. And, you know, I always referred to her as a white collie, but she was probably white and blonde together. But man, that was a dog that we loved. Well, my mom was a wonderful woman. She was very educated. Born in Tennessee, raised pretty much in Alabama, went to public schools in both Decatur and Birmingham, Alabama, went to Birmingham Southern. She played piano very well. She was very interested in the arts. She was well educated, an intelligent woman. She was a school teacher by trade. She taught at Barton, where Pat went to school his first year.
I was 4, and they needed a place to babysit me, and I had an aunt who was teaching first grade at the same school my mother taught at. And so I went to first grade when I was 4, strictly for babysitting. My aunt was going to keep an eye on me. And at the end of 6 weeks, I got a report card.
Well, he did so well that he just enrolled him at age 4 in first grade. And he did well. He did well ever since, too.
A nickname that my mother called me that I abhorred, it was Hattie Boy, because I was either going to be Patricia or Patrick, and I sometimes had the feeling that they wished that I'd been a girl. So Markham's name, by the way, was Chicken, and the reason they called him Chicken was not because of any fear of doing something, was because he cackled when he laughed like a chicken.
Daddy loved football, and we went to all the high school games. But not only did he love it, everybody in the stands could hear him rooting them on. Everybody knew when Ben Howe was there that he was, because he had a loud projecting voice. But he loved those players, and boy, he was always just rooting them on. Everyone, and even the coaches that I'm still familiar with will comment today about, man, you knew when Ben Howe was in there because he was really pulling for him.
He was a Mason, did a lot of work with other men becoming Masons. A lot of masonry is memorization, and he would help the young men coming up to be Masons to go out and teach them and how to memorize the verses, a lot of which is scripture. It was important to him, and it indirectly molded my life because of his approach to the scriptures.
He didn't smoke. He didn't drink. I only heard him cuss maybe one time. And it was Oldsmobile at that time had a transmission called the Hydromatic.
The new 1948 Oldsmobile is the first of the Futuramic cars. And with GM Hydromatic drive, there's no gear shifting. Just step on the gas and go. The smart way, the Oldsmobile way.
And we were sitting in the farm shop with someone else. I overheard this. I didn't actually see it. I mean, he wasn't speaking to me. And he said, he called some guy a hydromatic son of a. And I know, oh my God. And someone said, what's that? He's shiftless. And that's the only time I ever heard him use anything like a curse word.
And he did drive a school bus, yes. You have to remember, these were people who had gone through the Depression. Many of them had, really struggled. But one of the philosophies a lot of people, farmers and others had, was you do a lot of different things. And some years you're going to have some bad years doing something, but on the other hand, your other endeavors will probably do okay, and so you'll never struggle.
He was a master storyteller, but he was my Sunday school teacher too, and in that he used to enthrall all of us with teaching about the Exodus story especially. And I'm a big Moses fan, and I use, and when I do speeches and things like that, I frequently refer to something from Moses because Daddy put in my mind those stories
And I keep a whole list of Moses stories, many of them with a little twist, of course. But he was a great Sunday school teacher, and we had a reference library in our home called the Book of Life. Those became points of learning about, the spiritual part of our lives. We belonged to LaGrange Methodist Church, one-room church. It had lights. It did not have fans except the funeral home fans. Did not have any indoor plumbing, no water of any sort, no toilets or anything like that. But in cold weather, he would go and light the oil stove, pot-bellied stove. He'd go there a couple hours later to warm that church before everybody got there. The other thing I remember about that church is wasp. Church going on, people swatting at those wasps, trying to get them away. Feel the spirit.
I remember Easters and Christmas. Easters was a big time at Grandmother Markham's. Markham and Pat and I, we had so much fun in that big lawn that we always seemed like was huge. She had jonquils, buttercups, I guess you would call them, all over the front yard. And there was an ideal place to hide Easter eggs, and we were out there in the middle of all of it.
Carrie would come down, or with our cousins, the Elphingstones. We're all very close. We kind of worked together, we played together, and we were a whole lot together. A lot of family time together.
And that was a big thing. We grew up together, we were always so close.
This is apparently taken at Grandmother Markham's and Granddaddy Markham's home south of Cypress Corner. Pat's in a stroller. He's probably 6 or 8 months old, so I would be about 3 years old, thereabouts. That's probably the earliest one that I have.
It had beautiful archways between the rooms.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing I liked about the dining room, anytime any of us wanted something, depending on where you were sitting, if you were sitting at the right spot at the table, you'd mash on the button under the dining table.
Absolutely, that's right.
And the maid would come and bring our food.
Right. That's right.
Right.
And I wonder if that button is still on that dining table.
I don't know. There was a real small room, a small table next to the kitchen, though, where they had just breakfast for the two of them. And I remember Granddaddy Markham used to love molasses, and he would take a little jar and put some butter in there and there's molasses in there, and he would stir that all up and
put it
that
on his hot biscuit.
On his hot biscuit, and that was it. What he loved to have.
When I was born, Daddy came and picked Mama and I up in a Model A Ford and took us back to LaGrange, or Cypress Corner, and he complained about it being he lost his gloves, couldn't find his gloves, didn't have any heat in it, it was new. Of course, it would be late November, it could have been cold there. Only to find out when he finally got out, he was sitting on his gloves. I don't remember that, but that's the story that's told.
Mm-hmm. I only remember my mother trying to use a switch on me one time. And I ran from her. She couldn't catch me. I'm sure I did some things bad for my daddy, but I don't ever remember getting a spanking from my daddy.
I knew I wasn't supposed to get in the street, but I ran from her, and she couldn't catch me. So I ran from the street back to the house and crawled under the feather bed. I thought I would be safe, but she dragged me out from under that bed. But I learned my lesson. I did not run from her anymore.
He had a limestone business, and we spread agricultural limestone on the fields so the crops would produce more. We bought it from Batesville, Arkansas, or St. Louis, Missouri, and they would ship it in rail cars, and we would offload it into our trucks. Underneath the railroad track on the siding, we had, Daddy had dug a hole, and you would have this conveyor belt that would come out of the railroad car, onto this and go out on a conveyor belt over into the truck. But they frequently would send a flatbed car, and what we do then is we have to shovel off onto either the ground where we pick it up with a front end loader or into the truck. We also had an anhydrous ammonia business so that we put out when the crops were far enough along that they would need nitrogen boost. So we had that. We also baled hay and raked hay for folks.
Working on farms that's just a lot of work. Personally, farmers' work's never done just like a housewife's work's never done. But Daddy would take Saturday afternoons off, and we'd go to the movies, the shoot 'em ups, 2 westerns on Saturday afternoon. Eat popcorn for a dime and a Coke for probably a nickel. And I think we could get into movies for about 40, 45 cents, maybe, something like that. That's kind of a special time, get away from all that work. Because if there's anything we did on that farm, we worked. Pat and I both were heavily involved in driving trucks, driving tractors, and that sort of thing.
Nowadays we would be aghast, but at 8 years old I was driving a tractor in the fields. They're not near as big as the tractors that you see today, but I was driving a tractor in the field. At 12 years old I was driving a truck. 14 years old I was driving the truck on the road, which sounds like, how'd you get away with that? Different time. I was stopped at a traffic stop. Police were checking people. They were looking for somebody. My daddy had called and said, bring the truck up to the lime pit. And so I was driving through there, and the state policeman saw me. He just waved me on.
Every year we'd take off for a couple of weeks after we had got the crops laid by. And that would normally be in August, before school would start.
And we went out west, and we went north, and we went east, and we generally, sometime during this 2 weeks, we would stop and see relatives. Daddy wanted to be in as many states as he could, and so sometimes we'd take a little side trip just to say we were into whatever state.
One of them I remember, we went to Yellowstone National Park. We went to several places, but Yellowstone, because we saw, Old Faithful and all that. But we stayed in these little huts on the reservation or at the park, and it was just a little old hut there, and that you stayed in. There's one right after the other, kind of like a military type style. And I got up early in the morning, and so I strolled out of the front door of the hut, turned the corner, and I come face to face with a bear. Now the bear really is raiding the garbage barrel and all that. I didn't know that. All I know is I'm face to face with the bear. I run back in, scared to death, lean up against the door. Everyone says, there's a bear out there. And I was scared, but how I remember that, I don't know, except it made an impression on my life. For Yellowstone, I'll continue to go look for the bear.
We went to Toronto, and we stayed at a hotel, and the lady was most indignant with my father when he said that we lived in Arkansas. Oh, you mean Arkansas? We enjoyed our vacations, and it was a great break away from the work of the farm.
It was a nice time to get away, go and travel, spend a little time away from home.
I remember this scene, not because we were going on vacation at this time, but this car was a 52 DeSoto, and we got new cars about every 2-3 years, it seemed. I remember before this car, we bought a 50 or 51 Chrysler two-tone, and I hated the color. And I pitched a fit when they bought it, and at my young age, I was not very. But anyway, vacations were important, and we went out west a lot. We went to Toronto. We stopped in Goshen, Indiana, to see relatives there.
Gran, I think, was from Goshen.
Okay.
I'm almost positive. At least her family, anyhow.
And for clarification, your grand is grandmother Howe.
Nell Howe.
And we also took a trip to the East Coast. Well, I think maybe 2 trips, because we went to Charleston. We also went to Washington, D.C. I do remember also on our vacations how you and I would tussle in the back seat.
Oh,
Mom
yeah.
and Daddy would get so fed up with it.
And
now as an adult,
Typical boys.
right.
oh, yeah. Charleston, there's St. Augustine.
Right.
We went to New Mexico.
Right. We went to Yellowstone. We went to Salt Lake.
Yeah, Charleston, South Carolina. And the big deal I like about Charleston, South Carolina is crossing over that huge high bridge
Right.
over there, because there's a channel that runs through there. You know, we would cross that bridge, and it was so scary that you and I would hide down in the back seat of the car because we too scary to look out.
And as an adult back at Charleston, I saw that bridge that we'd gone over, and they had built a new bridge beside it that had the old bridge still there, and it looked, it wasn't quite so scary as
No, I mean,
Of course, I also remember the sad parts there, and that she contracted cancer.
She had treatment. I'm pretty sure she had radiation, which back then would have been probably pretty brutal. I know today it's come a long way, but it still, does a lot to the body.
Had a breast mastectomy, and within a couple of years, or maybe a year later, the cancer had come back, and that it migrated to the brain.
First indication that she was having some other problem was terrific headaches.
She lost some of her cognitive skills.
She did take care of me one particular period I was sick, and she was having terrific headaches. And she got up in the middle of the night and took care of me, and I still remember that.
during that time, boy, those mother skills came back on, and man, she got better all of a sudden. He took care of Pat, and everything like just gave us all hope. But it was just that instinct that a mother has to take care of the children. Granddaddy made a deal with the Lord. If Mama came out alive, he'd quit smoking. She came out alive, he stopped smoking, and he never smoked again. This guy, 65 years old, who at the time I thought was ancient. Within about 2 or 3 months, the cancer came back again, and things weren't looking real good. I remember standing outside with Daddy. He saw I was sad, and he said, "What's the matter?" I said, "Well, I know that Ma was dying." And there wasn't much you could say. The day it happened, early in the morning, Daddy came in and woke me up. Pat and I were sleeping in our bedroom. And he said, "Go get Miss Buford now." And I got in the car. I got in the car and went and got Miss Buford and brought her back. We made a call to Dr. Hayes, who was a physician, local physician there in Mariana, and he came out to proclaim that indeed she'd passed away. The funeral home made arrangements with the funeral home, and they came and prepared her. And that night, we had a viewing, if you will, at grandmother and grandmother Markham's home there 2 miles south. And the funeral service was the next day. That was at Mariana Methodist Church, and she's buried at LaGrange, where most of our family had been buried. It was a tough day. It was a hard day.
My Aunt Madge had commented that her husband, who I never knew, had died of a heart attack, and she had thought that was the worst possible way to die. And then after going through my mother's death, she changed her mind.
Fathers protect their children. And he protected us. And mostly what he did, he made certain that we stayed together. We worked together, we played together. We went to church together. We did everything together. And I remember telling him as we were pulling away from the church that I hope he never married again. Because when you're 12 years old, that's how you think. I tell you, that year she died, May of 1953, May 23rd, 2 days before her birthday. Should have been 44.
44. She was 43 when she died.
Yeah, like two days being 44. That summer was a hard one for all of us. I mean, not only were we getting used to this idea of her being gone, but that was the summer also within June, I believe, you broke your leg and you were driving tractor, pulling a hay rake, as best I recall.
We had stopped for lunch. I had stopped for lunch. You weren't there at the time. You were doing the hay bale and I was doing the raking.
Okay.
But I had driven the tractor to Cypress Corner to get lunch.
Yeah.
And I was driving back, and the drawbar on the back was we didn't have the money for nice clasp type pins, and so you'd have to reach back there periodically and keep it from loosening the pins. And I apparently jerked the wheel when I reached back one time and went off in the ditch. I was blessed not only that I wasn't run over, the tractor stalled, and I was partially out of the seat, and my leg was down and got broke. Ooh. And then I forget the man's name that we were baling hay for, but he came along. He was drunk. He stayed drunk a lot. He was drunk and got me picked up, put in the truck, and he took me to Grandmother Markham's, and he came up to the house drunk, and
ooh, I bet that didn't go over well, did it?
And then they took me to Helena to have my leg put in a cast.
Well,
and that was also the summer that Daddy had a double hernia, and you were the only one.
Yeah, I was the only one walking there. I think Daddy had his. You had your. I think your leg broke your leg perhaps in June. That sounds about right, because that'd be about the time for baling, first baling of hay.
That would have been right after Mama died, so I'm not sure. Daddy had his hernia at the same time, so it might have been a little later in the summer.
May have been, but I do remember this, that it was, I was the last one walking, and Mr. Hogan would come down and help me feed and things like that. Granddaddy also was there, but there's a special memory of Clyde Hogan always being there, Daddy's best friend.
Right.
He was a good friend of my dad too.
Yes, he was, and he would come down and help feed and that sort of thing. That was a hard summer.
Right. I was sort of like Markham, hoping that we would just be the three of us, and two of us and my dad.
2 years later, he remarried. It was a wonderful experience. Reconnected us with a wonderful woman who became Mama.
We went up one evening to her house. She owned 40 acres there in southwest, actually, of Forest City, on Yachty Road. And we walked in, and she was fixing donuts. I remember that. And she fixed supper, but she was fixing donuts when we got there. And I thought, that's different. The marriage was very quiet. I think they just got married at the courthouse. Went off on an overnight. And I forget who stayed with us there at the house.
A year later, they had a child, our sister, Mary Nell. After we moved to Forest City, we got a whole new bunch of cousins, and they became part of our family, and still are part of our family. But that was filled with a different kind of work. He and I both milked a cow every morning and every night. We had chickens to feed, and we had an egg route to run. And so that time of our life was kept very, very busy. Neither of us dated very much.
Socially, I did, feel a little awkward with some of my more mature classmates, and I dated generally girls who were a year behind me. But my friends, I had good friends in school. They never looked down on me that I was just a farmer's son.
I refer to Mama as my second mother. I refer to Mother as my first mother. So after Daddy and Mama married in 1955, they built what they call a playroom, 900 square feet across from the house out in Forest City, and it had a pool table in it. It had a ping pong table in it. It had a kitchen in it. It had a Coke machine in it, and that's where the neighborhood gathered, to play. And we'd also have softball, baseball, and those sorts of things. So we divided up that work and play, but the play was primarily with family.
Markham got along with my new stepmom, who I called Mom. Markham called her Mama. I could not call her Mama because I had called my birth mother Mama, and I could not do that, so I called her Mom. But Markham got along fine with her, pretty much. I was on a cross paths with her for quite some time, and it was only as an adult when I came back that she and I became best friends.